Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm Brittany Branyan, and I serve as Director of the Cary Center's Collegiate and Community Programs, to include the Nonprofit Affiliate Program, currently serving over 125 nonprofits in East Alabama and beyond. Welcome to the third installment of 4 Steps of Donor Fundraising Solicitation. Before we begin, I would like to share a little more about the Nonprofit Affiliate Program for those of you who may be unfamiliar. The Cary Center Nonprofit Affiliate Program fosters a community of educators, professionals, organizations, and students who have a desire to embody philanthropy, nonprofit studies, and leadership in their professional and personal lives. We provide professional development and networking opportunities to members to include Mix and Mingles, the Cary Center Volunteer Internship and Career Fair, Meet Me at the Vic, and the Cary Center Nonprofit Summit. In addition to those events, now more than ever, we are focusing on professional development and learning opportunities, to include our summer fundraising series and the Nonprofit Affiliate Book Club. The Cary Center nonprofit affiliates are the first to learn of upcoming programming, and membership is free. I will include information on how to join the nonprofit affiliate program in our follow-up email, and I would be delighted to have the pleasure of working with you, especially as we navigate this challenging time. We have so many exciting developments to share soon, and we would love for you to be the first to know. Now, let's get to the reason you are all here. Please join me in welcoming back today's speaker, Greg Doepke. Greg is the founder of Aspire to Give, a social enterprise that is dedicated to unleashing the human spirit to advance philanthropy through donor education, social innovation, collaboration, and advocacy. Greg serves as a philanthropist in residence at Auburn University's Cary Center for the Advancement of Philanthropy and Nonprofit Studies, as well as on the board of directors for the International Association for Advisors in Philanthropy. Greg is married to Suzette, a loving retired kindergarten teacher. Suzette and Greg have 2 giving daughters, 7 thriving grandchildren, and happily live in Auburn, Alabama. We are thankful that he took the time to join us today, especially since he's on his vacation. So we are so grateful to you, Greg, for taking this time to share your knowledge and passions with us. And without any further delay, please help me welcome Greg.
Hey, everybody. I'll go ahead and share my screen and welcome, and thank you all for attending today. And hopefully you'll get a lot out of this, or at least stimulate some thinking. So let me go ahead and share my screen if it's okay. Okay. And I'll just go ahead and get going on this. And this is the third, as Brittany mentioned, this is the third part of the series here. And it's on 4 steps of donor focus fundraising in COVID times, with step 3 being solicitation, or the ask, which I really, and I'll get into it as far as this question about ask. And what we'll do is we'll have a series here. We'll just kind of go over where we've come from so far in this program, and then just get some grounding there. And it was really, when I was preparing for this, I was looking at the solicitation, and I realized it is really a very integrated and complex, can be very complex, and it's not a single solution to say, okay, when do you ask for funds? Because we're really talking about raising money here. So I broke it down in a little different approach. I tried to get it so to stimulate some thinking on everybody's part, and hopefully we can go through it. So what I ended up doing is ended up with questions like, how much is needed? Who will fund the need? When to solicit? How to approach it? And then we'll do some sharing and hopefully learning from each other at the end. So let's start in the very beginning here. The format for this will be hopefully about 15, maybe 20 minutes of sharing. And I go through those sequence of questions I just shared with you. And hopefully it'll stimulate some thoughts for reflection. So when we get to the sharing and learning from each other, we can have some collaborative sharing and take it from there. As a recap of this series, we have 4 steps of fundraising: the identification, which is the prospecting, qualification, and going through that whole process and segmenting as part of identification. And we talked about cultivation. This is about solicitation. And while donors have a lot of gifts, 4 gifts they can give, today we're going to be talking on fundraising, which is obviously critical for, especially in these times. And then the next month will be stewardship. Okay, I've mentioned both in identification and cultivation. Hey, Brittany, is this full screen for you, for everybody? Okay. I mentioned how important this CRM, client relation management or donor relation management software, whether it be a spreadsheet or whether it be a Salesforce, some way of you all capturing the information on donors, because that is so critically important. And before we get going too far here, donors give for their reasons, not yours. And so that's why you'll see I don't have ask very much in there, because when talking with people and sharing, they say, well, I hate to ask for money. That is really, we've got to change the paradigm thinking on that. And it's not asking for money. It's trying to align the donors with their passions and their funding and other gifts so that it brings meaning to them. And so it is not asking for money. So it's really, really important to understand that it's like, and I was trying to think of an analogy saying, okay, let's say Brittany's remodeling her house. And I say, Brittany, go take a sledgehammer and tear down your wall. Well, she may not want to. I mean, she does it for her reasons. So when we talk about asking, if we ask, whether it be asking for money, and I hate to use that phrase again, that asking for money, but when we're trying to align find out what's important to the donor and then match what we have with the donor. So it's really finding that sweet spot. So it's through the discovery step of this process. And of course, this whole situation we're facing fundraising headwinds of the social distancing, the financial hardships, and the funding, a lot of it being diverted for donors to health-related causes, COVID causes, and those that are, meeting that need. So solicitation focus. Once again, we have the spreadsheet, which is by our side all the time, and is important that we keep that up to date. And so when we talk about solicitation, we're talking about conversation and selfless leadership. Some of us call it servant leadership, but it is not about us. It is about the donor. And so we've got to get out of our own skin in thinking of that. And and Brittany kind of had emailed me something this morning. I'm saying, if you don't offer the opportunity for the donor to get some enjoyment from their giving, then your answer is always going to be no. It is not a personal thing. It is people do things for their reasons. And so we've already gone through this process with our database of identification and cultivation. And the cultivation process from last time was basically we have
I think we lost Greg for a second. Can anyone else, can you put a thumbs up if you're able to see him? Because I cannot see him. Oh, there he is. Greg, can you hear us? We can't hear you. Let me unmute you. Can you unmute yourself? We can't hear you.
Okay.
There you go. There you go.
Oh, there you go. So where was I originally there, Brittany? Where did I cut out?
Thank you. We were on, I believe, number 2, where we were talking about not denying someone the ask, because we don't want to deny them the opportunity to give. And I think you were either right after that.
Okay, let's see here. So have we covered this before? Brittany, did I cover all this before? Did people hear me sharing this?
We can't see your screen.
You can't what? I'm sorry?
We can't see your screen.
Okay, hang on a second. Well, we're having some challenges today, aren't we?
That's okay.
Yeah, this happens. Well, okay, how about now?
It looks like it. There we go. Yes, and we were on the next page.
Okay. We're on Solicitation Focus.
We are, and we were on number 2.
Okay. So we've done the cultivation. We're zeroing in on the donor's sweet spot and focus. And it's a matter of meeting the donor's need and not asking for money. And the preparing questions and preparing to meet the need. And that's with the prospect. So what as a definition, gave some thought into this definition as far as this solicitation. So I define donor-focused solicitation as is guiding donors to align and act on their feelings, purposes, and gifts. In other words, with their sweet spot, so they feel good with their financial generosity. It's like anything else, whether somebody's doing something, they do it for their reasons, so they do it so they can feel good in terms of the donating their funding. So it's not about asking for money. So how much is needed? And this was, in preparing for this, once again, are you asking for a small amount, or are you asking for major gifts, or are you asking for programs? Are you asking to keep the lights on and unrestricted funding? So, in thinking through this funding, there are a lot of moving parts, and that's why I broke this down into different questions. So what I would like to do for each of these questions is share some insights or perspectives that hopefully will stimulate some thoughts on your end, so that when we get to the end, we can have some more conversation. And right now, I'm sure everybody is in survival mode, meaning the nonprofits are, and you read it all the time in articles, I know the major nonprofits are laying off people, and everybody's in survival mode because of the whole situation going on with the economy and the headwinds being faced. How much money is needed? Smaller gifts. Generally on this aspect, what I was thinking was, the smaller gifts you get through the social media and technology. You don't have the interaction of actually making the ask, and it's done almost on a less personal way via technology, but you're going to get smaller gifts. But it is more immediate. So if you need money more now, and in terms of how much money is needed, you can get smaller gifts via social media and technology. Categorize specific money needs. In other words, if you have a specific Obviously, first and foremost, in survival mode, you're trying to keep the lights on and pay salaries and do all those kind of things and keep your program running. So if you can break it down into specific needs and then, match the needs with targeted funding, because donors give for their reasons and not yours. If you have a donor that loves a specific type of program that you're involved with, it's kind of matchmaker type of thing if you can. And it all depends on the money. If you want unrestricted funds, generally the smaller funds are unrestricted. As you grow in the funds, they become more restrictive, which means that basically the donors, if they're giving more funding, they want to direct, or hopefully they may want unrestricted, but they may want to restrict it to something specific. Who will fund the need? Over on the left there, you see funding sources, and I got that 71% out of a recent article I read, that donors of nonprofit funding, 71% come from individual donors. And then you have grantors from foundations, you got community foundation grants, you got government grants, you got all kinds of different grantors. And now of course, everybody's competing for those grants. And then events, and of course you have corporate sponsors, social enterprise, which is close to my heart in terms of, finding alternative ways of generating funding. And then you have the in-kind donations. So here, some thoughts on this donor-focused solicitation during COVID is, once again, the easy thing, and all the nonprofit should have is implement and leverage easy to use technology, whether it be your website, social media, crowdfunding, text to give, email. Make it easy for the donors, as easy as possible for the donors to give, whether that be texting, whether that be on your website. Everybody ought to have something that's very easy for donors to give. And for you to direct it, very easy process. It's like anything else. It's simpler the better. Analyze your database. And what I'm referring to is this, for example, if you have someone who is retired and you look in your database and you say, oh, I have 5 donors that are really dedicated to my nonprofit, and they are all retired. And by the way, I know that they're 70 and a half, and they can make a qualified charitable distribution. That's what a QCD is. And that is a direct transfer of funds from their IRAs to the charity. And there are people that are 70 and a half that may not need as much IRA money, and that is a very easy way to get some funding if you have retirees that are good donors. And of course you have your individual donors and you have your board. So it's looking at your database and saying, okay, how can I match my database of donors or board with the needs I have? And you may be able to make that match. Another aspect is diversify the funding sources. Are there other funding sources you can get to? But right now in survival mode, you're just trying to figure out where you're going to get your funding. So probably the 2 quickest ways of getting funding is from the social media and from your database, and looking at that in a lot more detail. Once again, I refer to matching and aligning funders with needs and thinking different and be creative. And what I mean by that is, let's say you have you're involved with a nonprofit obviously you have a mission, but if you think about it, you may be able to somehow tie that mission or what you're doing with a way of generating fees or some kind of services, some way of generating a different way of getting some funding for your nonprofit, that it actually uses either someone a donor or someone who's a fan of your nonprofit, there may be a way of somehow creatively thinking how to engage others in doing that. When to solicit during COVID? And it's right now, remember to work your plan. When that first, in the first two parts of this program, I mentioned about identification and cultivation. And cultivation was talking about having a plan on your touch with your donors on some periodic frequency. And what kind of touch do you have with them? Is it via mail, via email, via phone call, whatever? And so you need to work your plan. And I have that 1-to-3 ratio up here. And what that means, what that refers to, and that is a general guideline that I've come across several times as far as how many touches that you have with your donors or prospective donors that you actually ask for money. Because if you know, just think about yourself of how often you want to be solicited in any way. Sometimes you just want them, you know, they should be reaching out. If you're an individual donor, you don't want everybody hitting on you for money all the time. And it's a relationship business. So yes, you can ask for funding. You can make solicitations. Sometimes it's via mail, sometimes via social media, but not every communication should be a solicitation for money. Once again, social media and technology, you know, you have your friends, fans, followers, and now funders, because once they've got to become a friend and a fan and a follower, and then funding will come with it. So it's important to understand who you have that is following you on social media. Targeted donor appeals, you know, in this really challenging time we're in, you know, if you have dedicated donors, you know, I would encourage you all to just have a conversation with them saying, hey, look, you know, I know you're a dedicated donor. I appreciate all you've done for me, and thank you for what you have done for my nonprofit. You know, we're having tough times. Is there any way that you could contribute more or help out in some other way? You know, if they are a passionate donor for your nonprofit, you know, an appeal, and it can't be via email. It's because of this, it's a more personal approach. But, you know, I would encourage you all to reach out to those donors and say, hey, look, can you help us out a little bit more? Because it's tough times. And, you know, once again, social distancing, virtual events, when to solicit, it's really difficult. And longer term, social media and technology, once again, on when, but I matching your grant funders with the needs in terms of when are the grants offered, when can you apply, all that. But that is longer term. These are all longer terms. One thing that you may want to really think about, the plan giving tools is IRA beneficiary for older donors. If you have a older donor and they have an IRA, and they are passionate about your nonprofit, and most of you all know this, you know, it's just a matter of saying, hey, would you consider making us a partial beneficiary of your IRA? It's a win-win for everybody, unless they really need it. But if they're dedicated to you, instead of the taxes going to the government, the full amount would be going to you. And that's a very simple thing. And that ought to be part of the educational process for your donors of the planned giving. But that's a longer term, as far as a longer term strategy. How to approach, you know, this is, and I've kind of alluded to it already, as far as how to approach during COVID-19. And once again, time your solicitation in terms of, you know, there's a strategy in your approach. And when you're asking, as part of your whole cultivation plan and your whole plan for fundraising, there needs to be thought put into how you're going to ask for money, when you're going to ask, and how, and you know, is it going to be via direct mail? Is it going to be via social media? And so you have to time your solicitations in this general frequency of 1 to 3. And it may vary depending on your own nonprofit situation, but you have to time your solicitation as well as how you're going to solicit. And you know your donors. And specifically talking about knowing your donors, meaning, you know, the greater the funding that you're getting from donors, the more you ought to know them, okay? You ought to know a lot about them, you know, as far as, you know, their family situation and what is passionate about. You know, they are your, in business sense, they are your clients. So you have to know them. You follow your cultivation plan. And so there ought to be, if you have major donors, you ought to have a specific cultivation plan and plan for fundraising and engaging of those donors. And it ought to work like, you know, you plan your, I mentioned before in the last session about planning your work and then working your plan. And vary the solicitation means. You know, sometimes it's via just a card, a reminder, hey, your annual subscription's due, or whatever, or maybe social media. And of course, if it's social media, generally it's a lower amount. And once again, your friends, fans, followers, and funders. These are different ways in terms of meaning of solicitation means. And if you meet outside and you meet safely outside, that's one. Generally, the more you're asking for, the more personal the approach should be. Safe face-to-face opportunities. I mentioned U.S. mail. That is still good. And the thank you note that was brought up last time in cultivation was so important. And that is not a solicitation, but it helps build a relationship. But you can send things through the mail that for an annual renewal of some kind. And then open-ended, tactful words and phone calls. So if you're going to make some kind of solicitation on the phone, think through how you're going to word it and how that's going to be. And people know that you are in the fundraising business, and your donors know that. So it is not something to be, you know it and they know it. So be forthright, full transparency, be honest, be transparent. So to jumpstart the conversation, we have our database and we know our clients, and we've been cultivating and following the plan. So let me open it up to say, okay, what suggestions and ideas do you have to solicit funding during COVID-19? And is anything you found to be working that you're willing to share with others? So Brittany, I'll turn it back over to you and see if people have questions or comments and discussion topics, and we could certainly put it in the chat. That'd be great. So Brittany, do you have anything to add?
I do. I took some notes. If you have questions, feel free while I'm going over a few things to pop them in the chat. If you would prefer not to say them out loud, I know how that is when you're not really prepared for it. So a few things is on social media. Let me see. I think a couple of you may be on in our book club for this month. We're reading the Networked Nonprofit, and it talks a lot about social media and digital campaigning and fundraising and that kind of thing. A few things that I've learned from that is first of all, like I'm a millennial, I'll say it a million times, I live on my computer and my phone and social media, but and while it's a very important piece to the fundraising, we don't want to rely on it because, like Greg said, it's smaller donations. If you do use social media, which I think everyone should be using it, and I think they should be using it to try to gain those donations, the best way is to promote a giving campaign. So to think of a specific campaign, there was one organization years ago that did, I think it was called Tweet Fest or something, and it was on Twitter. And they brought in a ton of money based on, I believe it was water accessibility for areas that didn't have clean water, something like that. They brought in a ton of money. So if you are, so your organization is working on something specific, there's a specific need, make sure that you promote that, and you can feel free to promote that through Facebook. They have a little boost option and you can pay a few dollars. It's not that expensive to get it out there. Use that to promote a specific campaign, and in that way people feel more led to give to a specific cause, to a specific thing that's going on. Also, go ahead.
Brittany, could I add to that?
Sure.
Yeah, this Giving Day, and when Auburn University started it a while back, and this is a thought that, you know, grandparents are ideal. And when Giving Day started with Auburn University, we have 7 grandchildren. So basically what we did is said, hey, each of our grandchildren, how about picking one of these individual charities that you are passionate about? And, you know, we'll $50, which is a small amount, but they start becoming engaged in giving, and it's a way of perpetuating our values to our grandchildren, and they start getting it about that. But in terms of a nonprofit, this Giving Day idea is great because the study and the research has shown that people want to give things that they are passionate about. And if you have something specific in your nonprofit, like you think about a restaurant, a menu of items that could be funded through a Giving Day or even social media, and you present that to donors, you know, that something may strike a chord with them that says, hey, I really like, you know, this specific aspect of the program, so I will give to that. And because they want to give for impact, and they want to know that their money that they're giving is making a difference, and it's not just going into a black hole. So.
I totally agree. And one last bit on social media before we dive into the chat, because there are a couple of questions. When you're using social media, and it's just like everything else, make sure that you post a thank you to donors on there, just like how you send donors thank yous in the mail, or you call them, or you maybe send an e-card. Make sure that you thank them, because it just shows that you're grateful for what they're putting into your organization. All right, we're gonna start with a question. Mac Jane says, as a new nonprofit, how do we go about soliciting from people we do not know personally? I understand that cultivating relationship precedes this training, but I just wanted to know if there's a way to solicitate people we don't personally know.
Basically, so my understanding is you don't know them personally. So what you would like to do in this kind of case is get an introduction. Somehow, you know, is there an intermediary? Remember when you're dating and you said, hey, can you introduce me to your friend Rick or whatever? If you can find someone that could introduce you, instead of just a cold call to them, then you have basically what you have is what we call a warm introduction. And if you have a warm introduction and somebody that is an intermediary that can be, hey, I know your friend Mary or whatever, and she said, hey, would it be okay if I reached out to you? And if you get that person to get permission, and then you can have a conversation and just start building the relationship, and nothing else, just keep the ball moving forward. So at least you have a relationship with this person. You get to introduce to them, and you can start building this relationship, and you can put them in your database and start cultivating them. Hopefully that is helpful.
Yes, and a quick plug for us on that, and also the Columbus Development Group. a great thing to do, and Mac Jane, I got your email this morning. Go ahead and follow up. We'll follow up after this and we'll make sure we get you plugged in. But a group like we have right now on this call, our nonprofit affiliate program, is a great way for you to start getting integrated with different nonprofit leaders and outreach and community and fundraising folks. It's a great way for you to meet people. And I've learned so much just from people who've been in the field forever. So we can personally help you get plugged in. Right now, we're not doing our face-to-face mix and mingles, but we're compensating by doing a ton of stuff online. So I would say go ahead and get plugged in with us, and we'll help point you in the right direction. Depending on where you're based. If you're in Columbus, then Jennifer Shaw would be a perfect person to get in touch with. All right.
Brittany, can I add a little bit to that?
Sure.
Tied to this whole question is, the 4 gifts for giving, and we know that the time, talent, and treasure. The concept of trusted connections is so important because the business we're in is a relationship business. And so trusted connections are so important. So if especially with Brittany being, I call her the hub of the wheel there of the nonprofit. So it's always, I'm sure it's okay with Brittany to say, hey, do you know of somebody that could do such and such or something for my nonprofit? People love to give and be helpful. So always feel free to reach out and start building those trusted connections, because to me, they are so important and really, to me, very fundamental to even getting introduced to new relationships.
Agreed. All right, Kim has a question. She says, I have found that in the time of COVID, the donors understand the need more than ever. I think, like you said, having a real conversation about the need. There is no hiding the fact that organizations have a decreased fundraising ability through events, etc. So people realize that they have to supplement via a donation. If they truly care about the organization, they will give in the time of need. It is easier in some ways than normally. I will agree with you, Kim. I'm currently working on, so many of you I'm very grateful that you helped participate in our research study that I'm currently wrapping up and putting into a report, and we will touch on that later in August. But I've been reading all of the input from different organizations and what people are struggling with. And I will say, I think that and the theme is very similar. I had events that canceled, I had to pay for those events, and now I don't get the donations that paid for that fundraiser, or my need is up and my funds are down, or whatever. I think to look at what you're struggling with, and we may just be reiterating this, hopefully it's in some form that makes sense. But taking those needs, writing them down, putting them into something that makes sense, and then going to your donors with those needs. So we had to cancel our gala in April. We typically fund 70% of our programs through that gala's donations. We're in need right now to continue our to continue our programs. How can you help us, or can you help us in this way? So make sure you are specific in the need, and you let them know what has gone on during the time that has put you in this position. And like Kim said, I definitely think that they understand that. And if they are willing to give, or if they are able to give, they certainly will.
Yeah, and to add on to what Brittany said, Brittany, thank you for sharing all that. It's a matter of, people, you ask them, you say, hey, would you consider giving a gift now? Oh, I can't. Well, when would be a good time that may be a better time for you? Because I understand it's really a difficult time. It needs to be, I talk about trusted connections and trusted relationships. It's all based on trust. So to be trustworthy, you have to be transparent and be honest and be very forthright. The last thing that you need to be doing is hiding stuff, because people get turned off with that. And if they are passionate about your cause, honest, open conversations is where, and people understand that.
Yes, that's another point. If you're reading the Networked Nonprofit with us, transparency comes up several times in the book, especially when you're dealing with social media. It is more important than ever to make sure that you are being transparent. And Kim said initially the stock market, when the stock market took a hit initially, that was a big issue, but now it has rebounded. The bigger donors are still out there and you have those resources. Yes, you do. And how Greg mentioned earlier about having the giving conversation on your IRAs and all of that. There's also planned giving. We have a program on August 12th with Alicia Davenport, who is over that at Auburn University. And so I would say that that's a huge resource. Most of these people are a lot more stable than those of us who are in our 30s, 40s, 50s and still working. So I would make sure you jot down to meet with us on planned giving on August 12th at 10 a.m. and make sure that you email me to reserve your spot, because that's a huge demographic that you want to make sure they're still out there. And I know that they give so much to us all the time anyway, but you want to make sure that you get that conversation and that you cover it in some way or form. What do you think, Greg? I know you're a fan of that.
Well, yeah, I'm a big fan of, the people, especially if you look at out there in terms of who's my prospects for potential donors. And, the people that are working or struggling with, whether it be school or, a gazillion different things, keeping my job, working, COVID, all that. The folks that are retired or that have been retired or retiring, typically they've worked, and if they have a, Social Security and pension and maybe an IRA account, they are not as affected. And I'm speaking for myself specifically. I'm not as affected as other people. I'm not as affected as Brittany is, for example. And so people like myself that are, quote, retired, although I don't like that word anyway. But anyway, that are in that mode, that have worked for and have some pension type income, whether it be from a pension, Social Security, retirement from Auburn University, they may have an IRA. The quickest money to get folks like that is probably this qualified charitable distribution. That is really easy, quick, easy money, so to speak, for donors to give if they are passionate about it. And there's a lot more education needs to be for those folks, because I don't know how many are really familiar with that and how powerful it is. And just as a very brief, the way that works is basically the person can take from their IRA, and they don't have to take 70.5, and they don't have to take the distribution IRA minimum, but they can still do a qualified charitable distribution at age 70.5. And it goes directly from the custodian directly to the nonprofit. And it's just a matter of directing the check. And it counts as part of their minimum distribution, but it's not taxable money to them. So it's kind of nice for people that have it, that have, they're not counting necessarily on their IRA for income.
Right. So. Thank you for sharing more about that. And one last thing I was going to mention about, we talked about events, and events are canceled, and I've learned a lot about how many events have been canceled that were huge fundraisers for organizations. And I think that is jarring in many ways, but allows us to reposition ourselves and rethink, what we're doing. But again, a plug, it just happens naturally. Next Wednesday, we are going to focus on donor-centered virtual events with Brooke Battle. And so that is a lot of times our events are ways to solicit new donors, because people bring along their friends to these galas or or these golf tournaments or whatever, and it's a great way to meet people. And we don't have that right now, sadly. Some things are able to take place, but we don't have a lot of that right now. So I want to make sure that you all are tracking that next Wednesday we have donor-centered virtual events with Brooke Battle, and you can find all of that information online. And I'll be on our Facebook page, and I'll be sending out more on that as well. Okay, let's see. In the chat, Kim also said, oh, yes, this is a great little piece of information. She found that the time of not event planning allows for more donor outreach and grant writing. Absolutely. In my world, I have found that not having in-person events has really allowed me to focus on programs like this that I feel have been arguably more efficient and helpful to our clients. So yes, I agree. Right now that we're not actively event planning, it has allowed for more donor outreach and grant writing. What do you think, Greg?
Yeah, I think this is a great time. I mean, you know, with every time you get a lemon, like this lemon of a time we're in now, it's time to make lemonade. And how do you make lemonade out of this lousy time? And this is a great time to, you know, get your database straight, get your process for fundraising, and through the 4 steps, you know, prospecting, the identification, the cultivation, the solicitation, understanding what your plan is, and then get your plan in place so that you can really, when we get to the new normal, whenever that's going to be, you can put it in place. But it is and it's also a great time for you know, a lot of people come back to the basics and the simple stuff, and they really recognize what's really important in their lives. And when they do that, they start thinking about how they can feel good about helping others. And so this is a great time to start building those relationships and finding those people, because you're helping them feel good. I mean, you think, you know, you're doing good, but it's really important to ask for the prospects. And Brittany, you kind of alluded to that in that email to me, you know, that, you know, we need to, if you never ask people for something, you'll never get it. So you need to be forthright and open and honest and say, hey, can you help us in this way? Can you help us in that way? You know, all they're going to say is no. And it's not a personal no. It is a no because of their situation, for their reasons. Maybe it's not, you know, they got a lot going on in their world and it's not the right time for them. But, you know, it's important to have those conversations. We call them philanthropic conversations.
All right. Well, I think we covered a ton of ground today, and we'll go ahead and start wrapping up. Again, everyone join me in thanking Greg so much for leading this conversation, and we will see him again in August. I believe it's the 26th. That we will, yes, August 26th at 10 a.m. We are going to cover stewardship. And go ahead and mark your calendars again for next Wednesday, the 5th. We're going to cover donor-centered virtual events with Brooke Battle from Swell Fundraising. She does incredible stuff, and I'm so excited to learn more about these events. And then we're going to cover planned giving with Alicia Davenport the next week, the following week, the 12th. So if you have any questions at all, you can contact me or Greg, or I can get you in touch with Greg. And look forward to getting our follow-up email following this program, and we will have a small little survey. If you want to join our nonprofit affiliate program, you can go ahead and do that. Again, it's free, and we will also include a link to our YouTube channel that has all of our programs recorded and posted on there. And feel free to go ahead and share those with your friends. So again, thank you so much. Join me in thanking Greg for his hard work and helping us today. And we will see you all next week.